My daughter said, "We'll be happier when you're not around," and slid the brochure for the assisted living facility across my own kitchen table. Her husband stared into his coffee. My granddaughter giggled. They thought I'd cry, sign the papers, and disappear by Sunday. They didn't know I'd already called my attorney that morning. By Monday, none of them had a home left.
Hello, everyone. Today's story was originally created by our team and produced as a full story just for you. If you'd like to share your own story, the submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get into it.
My name is Linda. I'm 64 years old. I live alone in the four-bedroom craftsman house on Linden Street that my husband Daniel and I bought in 1987, the year our daughter Megan turned 3. Daniel passed 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to the funeral. I haven't moved a single piece of furniture since. I want you to understand what my life actually looks like before I tell you what happened last Tuesday, because the version my daughter has been selling does not match the woman who lives in this house. I wake up at 5:45 every morning. I walk 2 miles before the sun comes up, around the neighborhood loop that ends at the elementary school where I used to volunteer. I work part-time as a freelance estate paralegal, 40 years in the same field. I still get calls from 3 firms a month asking if I can take overflow work. I do my own taxes. I do my neighbor's taxes. I host Sunday dinner for whoever wants to come, the way I have since 1994, and I have not missed a single one except the week Daniel died. I am not a fall risk. I am not confused. I am not lonely in the way people assume widows are lonely. I miss my husband every day, but I've built a life around the missing. I'm telling you this because last Tuesday morning, 8 days before I sat down to record this, my daughter Megan called and asked if she could stop by for coffee. Megan is 38. She lives 40 minutes away in a development called Willow Run with her husband Brad and their 11-year-old daughter Ava. Megan calls me once a week, usually Wednesdays, usually for about 9 minutes. She has never just stopped by for coffee, not once in 5 years. I said yes anyway. I'm her mother. She arrived at 10 in the morning. Brad was with her. Ava was with her. Ava should have been at school. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was that Megan was carrying a folder. A real folder, the kind with a plastic cover and a printed label I made coffee. I put out the lemon shortbread I keep. In the tin Daniel bought me in Edinburgh. Brad wouldn't take any. Brad wouldn't look at me at all. He sat at the end of the table with his hands wrapped around a mug, like it was the only thing keeping him in the chair. Megan started with small talk. The weather, Ava's grades, the new car they were thinking about. I let her talk. I have spent 40 years watching people work up to the thing they actually came to say, and I knew this was a wind up. Then she opened the folder. "Mom," she said, "Brad and I have been talking, and we're worried about you." I set my coffee down. I didn't say anything. That makes people uncomfortable, and it makes them keep talking. And what they say next is usually the truth. "The house is too much," she said. "It's 4 bedrooms, Mom. The stairs. The yard. We just think, with Dad gone, it might be time to consider something smaller, something with people around, where you wouldn't have to worry about anything." She slid the brochure across the table. Cedar Brook Senior Living, Independent and Assisted Care. The pages were already dog-eared. 3 of them were highlighted in pink. She had not picked this up yesterday. She had been carrying this around for a while. I looked at the brochure. I did not pick it up. "I'm not worried about anything, Megan," I said. "Mom, you're becoming a fall risk. I walked 4 miles this morning. The family is worried." That was when she nodded at Ava, a small nod. The kind a mother gives a child who has been told to recite a poem at Thanksgiving. Ava put down her juice. She looked at me with the careful, rehearsed face of a child who has been coached, and she said, in a voice that was almost cheerful, "We'll be happier when you're not around, Grandma. Mommy said so." Then she giggled, because she was 11 and she didn't fully understand what she had just said, and she was proud of remembering her line. The kitchen got very quiet. I looked at Megan. Megan looked at the brochure. Brad looked at his coffee. Nobody corrected the child. Nobody said, "Honey, that's not what we meant." Nobody softened it. I'm going to tell you the truth. In that moment, I did not feel sad. I did not feel angry. I felt something I had not felt since I was 26 years old, and a senior partner at my firm told me women couldn't handle estate law. I felt a switch flip. I poured Brad more coffee. I told Ava the shortbread was made with real butter. I asked Megan to leave the brochure so I could look it over properly. She brightened. She thought she had won. I walked them to the door at 10:45. I waved from the porch until their SUV turned the corner. Then I sat on the porch swing for 1 hour, exactly 1 hour, and I did not move. At 11:45, I went inside. I picked up the phone in the hallway, the landline Daniel installed in 1989. I dialed a number I had not called in 3 years. It was not my attorney. Not yet. The man who answered said, "Linda, is everything all right?" I said, "No, Wesley, it is not. I need you to come over today, and I need you to bring everything Daniel told you to bring if I ever called." Wesley Pierce is my late husband's younger brother. He is 61 years old, retired 3 years ago from a 34-year career as a forensic accountant for a regional firm that mostly worked divorce cases and corporate embezzlement. He lives 22 minutes from me in a townhouse he keeps cleaner than any man I have ever met. He has never married. He plays chess on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Senior Center, not because he needs the company, but because he likes beating retired engineers. 6 months before Daniel died, when he was already too thin, and we both knew where things were heading, he sat me down on the back porch one evening and said something I did not understand at the time. He said, "Linda, if anything ever feels wrong with Megan and money, call Wes first. Lawyer second. Wes will tell you what's actually happening. The lawyer can only tell you what to do about it." I asked him what he meant. He said Megan had asked him twice in the previous year about the house, about our retirement accounts, about whether he had updated his will. He had not thought much of it the first time. The second time, he had paid attention to how she asked. I told him she was just being practical. He said, "Maybe. Just promise me you'll call Wes." I promised him. Then we never spoke of it again. And 4 months later, he was gone, and I forgot the conversation, the way you forget things when grief is filling every room in your head. I remembered it last Tuesday on the porch swing. Wesley arrived at 1:15. He brought a leather briefcase I had not seen since Daniel's funeral. He sat at the same kitchen table where my granddaughter had said her line 3 hours earlier, and he asked me to start at the beginning. I told him everything: the brochure, the highlighted pages, Megan's rehearsed concern, Ava's recited sentence, Brad refusing to look at me. The fact that Megan had clearly been planning this for a while, and the fact that nobody in that room had corrected an 11-year-old child for telling her grandmother she should disappear. Wesley listened without writing anything down. When I finished, he asked one question: "Has Megan had access to any of your accounts since Daniel died?" I started to say no, then I stopped. I had to actually think about it. I had to walk myself back through the worst 6 months of my life. The months after Daniel's funeral, when I could not remember if I had eaten breakfast when Megan came over 3 or 4 times a week with paperwork and a pen and a soft voice telling me she just wanted to help me with things her father used to handle. I had signed things. I did not remember all of what I had signed. I told Wesley this. He nodded once. He did not look surprised. He asked me to bring him every bank statement, every brokerage statement, every credit card statement, and every piece of mail from a financial institution that I had received in the last 2 years. I keep all of it in a fireproof box in the office closet. Daniel taught me that. I brought him the box. He opened his laptop and asked for the Wi Fi password. For the next 4 hours, Wesley did not speak except to ask for another statement or another login. I made him a sandwich at 4 o'clock. He ate it without taking his eyes off the screen. At 6:15, he closed the laptop and asked me to sit down. He had found 3 things. The first thing, Megan was listed as the emergency contact on my checking account, my savings account, and my primary brokerage account. I had set that up. I remembered setting that up. What I did not remember was that on the savings account, she was also listed as a co-signer with full transaction authority. That had been added in November, 4 months after Daniel died, on a form I had signed in the credit union lobby while Megan stood next to me, telling me it was just so she could help me pay bills if I ever got sick. The second thing, starting 18 months ago, there had been a pattern of small withdrawals from the savings account. $200 here, 450 there. Never large enough to trigger a notification. Never on the same day of the month. Never in the same amount. Wesley added them up while I watched. $46,820 over 18 months, none of which I had taken out, all of which had been authorized using Megan's cosigner credentials. The third thing was the one that made me sit down even though I was already sitting. 6 weeks ago, someone had submitted a home equity line of credit inquiry against my house. The inquiry listed me as the borrower and Megan as the responsible party assisting the application. The inquiry had been declined because the underwriter wanted a notarized signature from me, which I had never provided. But the application existed. It had my social security number on it. It had my date of birth. It had the value of my house. It had a requested credit line of $240,000. I asked Wesley what this meant. I asked him plainly. I needed someone to say the words. He took off his glasses. He folded them carefully and put them on the table next to his cold coffee. He looked at me the way Daniel used to look at me when he had bad news and wanted me to be ready for it. Linda, he said, she wasn't trying to move you out so she could check on you on weekends. She was trying to move you out so she could move in, or sell, or borrow against this house until there was nothing left of it. The Cedar Brook brochure isn't the plan. The Cedar Brook brochure is step 3 of the plan. You're already in step 2. I asked him what step 1 had been. He said, Step 1 was your husband dying. She's been working on this since the funeral.
Hey everyone, quick pause here. If you're enjoying the story so far, a like really helps the channel, and hitting subscribe means you won't miss the next part. All right, back to it.
Wesley stayed until almost 10 that night. Before he left, he told me 3 things in order. Do not confront Megan. Do not change any account passwords yet. Do not move any money. He said the worst thing I could do right now was tip her off. As long as she believed I was still the grieving, distracted widow who would sign whatever was put in front of me, she would keep moving on her timeline. That gave us a window. He wanted me to use it. I did not sleep that night. I sat in Daniel's old recliner in the den with the lamp on and a yellow legal pad on my knee, and I wrote down every interaction I could remember with my daughter since the funeral, every visit, every phone call, every favor she had done for me, and every favor I had done for her. I filled 12 pages. Some of it I had genuinely forgotten. Megan picking up my mail for 2 months during the worst of my grief, telling me she would sort the bills from the junk so I would not feel overwhelmed. Megan sitting with me at the credit union, the bank, the brokerage, the insurance company, just to make sure they don't take advantage of you, Mom. Megan offering to handle the estate paperwork because she knew I was a paralegal and the cobbler's children have no shoes and I would never get around to my own filings, and other things, looking back, that I should have questioned at the time. The week she insisted I get a new email address because my old one had been compromised. The morning she changed my mailing preferences at the brokerage from paper statements to electronic because paper was wasteful. The afternoon she set up a password manager on my computer and told me she would keep a backup copy of the master password just in case. I had said yes to every one of those things. I had been grateful for every one of those things. Wednesday morning, I went to the post office and asked the clerk to print me a list of every change of address and forwarding order that had been placed on my name in the last 2 years. She told me they could only show me active orders, but she would do what she could. 20 minutes later, she handed me a printout. There were two active forwarding orders I had never set up, both partial forwarding, which means they only redirect mail from certain senders. One was forwarding everything from my primary brokerage to a P.O. box in Megan's zip code. The other was forwarding everything from the credit union to the same P.O. box. I thanked the clerk. I drove home. I did not cry in the car. I have not cried about this once. Wednesday afternoon, I called the credit union and asked, very casually, whether anyone had inquired about my accounts recently. The woman on the phone said yes. My daughter had called 3 times in the past month asking about consolidating my checking and savings into a single managed account and asking what the process would be for adding herself as a power of attorney holder. The woman said she had told Megan that the account holder, meaning me, would need to come in personally with notarized documentation. I thanked her. I did not tell her anything else. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then I called Wesley. He came over again that night. He brought somebody with him. Her name was Patricia Go. She was 67 years old, semi retired, and she had spent the last 20 years of her career as an elder fraud attorney for a legal aid organization that I had referred clients to dozens of times over the decades, but had never personally needed. Wesley had worked with her on 3 cases before he retired. He trusted her completely. Patricia did not waste time. She sat at my kitchen table, opened a yellow notepad of her own, and asked me to walk her through everything I had told Wesley, plus everything I had found out since. I did. She asked precise questions. She wrote in shorthand. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she set down her pen. Linda, she said, I want to be direct with you because you're a paralegal and you'll see right through anything else. What your daughter is doing is called financial elder abuse. It is a felony in this state. The Cedar Brook pitch is what we call the soft launch. The actual play is a durable power of attorney. She explained it the way she would have explained it to a client who did not already know. Once I was inside an assisted living facility, even an independent one. Megan would have a much easier time arguing that I needed help managing my affairs. A cooperating doctor, a sympathetic notary, a power of attorney form signed during a difficult week. And Megan would control my accounts, my house, my medical decisions, and the trust that held the rest of Daniel's estate. The home equity application would go through on a second attempt. The house would be drained, then sold. The brokerage would be liquidated. By the time I figured out what was happening, if I ever did, the money would be gone, and I would be a woman in a memory care unit whose family said she was confused. I asked Patricia how long I had. She looked at her notes. She tapped her pen against the page twice. She'll push again within 10 days, Patricia said. They always do. The brochure visit was the test balloon. When you didn't refuse outright, she read that as a yes. She'll come back with something more concrete, a tour, a deposit, a doctor's appointment she wants to drive you to. That night at 11:17, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Megan. Mom, Brad and I want to come by Saturday with the Cedar Brook director, just to look at brochures together. No pressure. I read it twice. I set the phone down. I did not answer until morning. Thursday's morning, I texted Megan back. Saturday at 10 works. I'll have coffee ready. Three dots appeared immediately. Then her reply came in. Perfect. Love you, Mom. A heart emoji. I had not received a heart emoji from my daughter since Mother's Day. I had 3 days. I used them. Thursday, I drove to the credit union at 9 in the morning when I knew the branch manager would be on the floor. I had known her for 12 years. Her name is Yvonne. I sat across from her and I told her quietly exactly what was happening. She did not flinch. She had seen it before. I removed Megan as emergency contact and cosigner on every account I held with that institution. I set up dual factor authentication on every login. I added a verbal password that anyone calling about my accounts would have to provide before Yvonne or her staff would discuss anything, even balance inquiries. I asked her to flag the account for any unusual activity and call me directly. If Megan tried to contact the bank again, she agreed. I did the same thing at the brokerage that afternoon, in person, with their fraud specialist. I did the same thing at the credit card company over the phone that evening. By Thursday night, Megan had been quietly removed from every financial relationship she had inserted herself into during the worst year of my life. Friday morning, I went to the post office. I filed cancellation forms for both unauthorized forwarding orders, and I filed a formal complaint with the Postal Inspector for mail fraud. The clerk gave me a case number and told me an inspector would call within 10 business days. I thanked her. Friday afternoon, I met with Patricia at her office. We spent 4 hours together. By the time I left, I had signed a new estate plan that voided everything. Megan thought she knew about my finances. The corporate trustee was a firm Patricia had worked with for 15 years and trusted completely. They would administer the trust according to my instructions, with no family member having any discretionary power. Megan was named, but only as a contingent beneficiary, and only if she met conditions she would never be told about in advance. Ava was named separately, with a fund administered independently, structured so that Megan and Brad could never access a single dollar of it under any circumstances. Patricia also drafted a third document, a demand letter ready to send by certified mail Monday morning if I authorized it, terminating every form of financial support I had been quietly providing to Megan and Brad's household for the last 12 years. I had not told Patricia about that support yet. She had asked me directly, the way a good attorney asks. and I had told her the whole truth. I will explain that part in a moment. It matters. Friday evening, I called Wesley, and we walked through Saturday's plan together. The most important thing he wanted me to understand was that I was not going to confront Megan. Not on Saturday. Saturday was a test. I wanted to see how far she was willing to go in person, in my own kitchen, with witnesses present. I wanted to see if she would lie to my face after I had given her every chance to come clean. The other thing we agreed on was the decoy. Thursday night, I had set up a fake file in the locking drawer of my home office. The file was labeled Estate Current. Inside it, I had placed 3 forged bank statements showing balances, roughly 20% higher than my actual accounts, a fake brokerage summary showing a portfolio that did not exist, and a single sheet of paper that looked like the cover page of a will. The cover page named Megan as the sole beneficiary of everything. The file was old. The paper was slightly yellowed. I had used the printer settings to fade the ink. It looked like something that had been in the drawer for 2 years. Wesley's theory was simple. If Megan or Brad came to the house on Saturday and saw an opportunity to confirm what they already believed, they would take it. And if they did, they would tell me everything I needed to know about how far they were willing to go. Saturday morning, I was up at 5:30. I walked my 2 miles. I came home and made a pot of coffee. I put out the lemon shortbread. I set 4 places at the kitchen table. I left the office door slightly open, the way I always do, with the locking drawer slightly cracked, the way I never do. They arrived at 10:04. Megan, Brad, Ava, and a fourth person I had not expected. He introduced himself as Daniel Reyes, the resident relations director at Cedar Brook. He was wearing a suit. He was carrying a leather portfolio. He had a name badge clipped to his lapel. I let them in. I poured coffee. I asked Mr. Reyes how long he had been with Cedar Brook. He said, 8 years. I asked him what brought him out on a Saturday morning to a private home for what was presumably a preliminary conversation. He looked at Megan. Megan jumped in and said she had asked him as a favor. I asked Mr. Reyes whether he made house calls often. He said only for families that had already toured the facility. I poured myself more coffee. I asked Megan, in the same tone I had been using when she had toured the facility. She froze for half a second. Then she recovered and said she had stopped by once, briefly, just to see the grounds. Mr. Reyes, who did not know what was happening in the room, helpfully added that it had actually been twice, and that she had been very thorough both times, and that she had already put down a small refundable deposit to hold a unit on the second floor of the independent living building. The kitchen got very quiet. Brad set down his coffee. He stood up. He said he needed to use the bathroom. I told Brad the bathrooms was the second door on the left down the hall. He nodded and walked off. He did not turn left. He turned right. Right is my office. I did not stop him. That was the point. I stayed at the table. I asked Mr. Reyes about the deposit. How much? He said 3,000, fully refundable, held against the second floor unit Megan had selected. I asked when she had placed it. He checked his portfolio. 2 months ago. 2 months ago. I looked at my daughter. She was staring at the brochure on the table like she could will the conversation back onto its script. Ava was eating her second piece of shortbread, swinging her legs under the chair, oblivious. I asked Megan, in my normal voice, why she had not mentioned the deposit when she came over Tuesday. Megan said she had wanted to surprise me. She said she had been planning to tell me today, as part of the conversation. She said the deposit was refundable, so there was no harm. I let her finish. I sipped my coffee. I waited. Mr. Reyes, to his credit, had started to understand that something was off. He was looking between Megan and me, then at the hallway where Brad had disappeared, then back at his portfolio. He was a salesman, but he was not a stupid man. 8 minutes had passed since Brad left the table. I excused myself. I told Mr. Reyes I needed to check on something and would be right back. Megan started to stand. I told her to sit down in the voice I used to use when she was 16 and trying to leave the house in a skirt I had not approved. She sat down. I walked down the hall. The office door was open wider than I had left it. The locking drawers was open. Brad was standing next to it with his phone held over the file, taking pictures. He was on the third or fourth page. I could hear the soft click of his camera, the kind of click that is supposed to sound like a real shutter, but does not actually mean anything. He did not hear me come in. I stood in the doorway and watched him for a full 10 seconds. He turned the page. He photographed the cover sheet of the fake will. He smiled. Then he looked up. I said calmly, "Find what you were looking for, Brad?" He dropped his phone. It bounced on the rug. He bent to pick it up, and his face was the color of skim milk. He started to stammer. He said he had gotten lost. He said he had thought it was the bathroom. He said he had heard a noise and was just checking. Megan appeared in the doorway behind me. She had followed me down the hall after all. She saw the open drawer. She saw Brad with the phone in his hand. She saw her own face reflected in the moment. And for the first time in her adult life, she looked at her husband the way she should have been looking at him for years. "Brad," she hissed, "I told you to wait. I told you not to do it today." The room went very still. Megan turned to me. The mask was gone. Her mouth was open. She had spoken faster than she had thought, and she could not get the words back. "Mom," she said, and her voice had changed. It was harder now. The performance was over. "Mom, just sign the papers. It's easier for everyone. The house is wasted on you. You rattle around in here alone. Dad is gone. The money is just sitting there. Brad and I have a daughter to raise. We have a future to think about. You have had your life." I did not answer. Ava had heard her mother's voice rise from the kitchen. She came down the hallway and stopped at the edge of the office. She saw her father holding his phone. She saw her mother's face. She saw me standing very still. She started to cry the kind a child cries, when she does not understand what she has walked into but knows it is bad. I walked past Megan. I walked past Brad. I went into the kitchen. Mr. Reyes was standing now with his portfolio under his arm, ready to leave. I thanked him for his time. I told him I would not be requiring his services, and that Megan's deposit should be refunded to her own account, not mine, and I would expect written confirmation of that refund by Monday. He nodded so fast I thought his neck might hurt later. He let himself out. I went back to the office. Brad was sitting on the floor now, against the wall, holding his head. Megan was crying. Ava was crying. I picked up Ava and carried her to the kitchen and gave her my phone and pulled up a cartoon and told her Grandma needed to talk to her mommy and daddy for a few minutes and everything was going to be fine. She believed me. She is 11. She still believes adults. Then I went back to the office. I did not yell. I did not raise my voice once. I sat down in the chair behind the desk. I told Megan and Brad to sit in the two chairs across from me. They sat. I told them I needed the weekend to think. I told them to come back Sunday evening at 6. I told them to bring nothing. No brochures, no portfolios, no daughter, just themselves. They left 12 minutes later. Megan tried to hug me on her way out. I let her arms touch my shoulders and I did not move. After they were gone, I went back to the office and opened the locking drawer and looked at the decoy file. Brad had photographed every page. He had what he came for. He thought he had what he came for. At 11:17 Saturday night, my phone buzzed. A monitoring alert from the brokerage. Someone had just attempted to log into my main account using my social security number as a recovery key. The attempt came from an IP address in Willow Run. I called Wesley at 6:50 Sunday morning. He was already awake. I told him about the login attempt. He told me he was on his way and he was bringing Patricia. They arrived at 7:17 with two coffees and a box of pastries from the bakery on Elm Street that Daniel used to love. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table. I had started to think of it as a kind of workbench. Patricia opened her laptop first. She pulled up the monitoring report from the brokerage. The login attempt had originated from a residential IP address registered to Willow Run, specifically to Brad and Megan's house. The attempt had used my social security number, my date of birth, and the last four digits of a checking account that Megan would have had access to before I removed her on Thursday. The attempt had failed because the brokerage now required two factor authentication that ran through my phone. My phone had not gotten the request because the system had flagged the attempt as suspicious and locked it before the code ever generated. Wesley pulled up the photographs Brad had taken Saturday. He could not see them directly, of course, but he could see what Brad had done with them afterward. Brad had emailed them to himself from his own Gmail address at 1:52 Saturday afternoon, about an hour after they left my house. Wesley knew this because the brokerage's fraud team, once alerted Saturday night, had been able to correlate Brad's IP with two other suspicious access attempts on financial sites in the previous month, including the home equity inquiry from 6 weeks ago. The brokerage had shared the IP record with Patricia under a fraud cooperation protocol I had not known existed. In other words, the brokerage already had a file on Brad. They had been quietly watching him for 6 weeks. They had been waiting for me to call. Patricia explained what would happen Monday morning. At 9 a.m., she would file an emergency motion with the county court requesting a temporary protective order against Megan and Brad based on attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I am not a vulnerable adult in the medical sense, but the statute in this state has a financial definition that applies once a pattern of attempted exploitation has been documented. The pattern was now documented. The motion would freeze any pending financial actions Megan or Brad had initiated in my name. It would also place a flag on my social security number with every major credit bureau. At the same time, Patricia would send the demand letter we had drafted Friday by certified signature required mail to Megan's address. The letter would terminate every form of financial support I had been providing to their household for the last 12 years. The letter would be effective immediately upon its receipt. This is where I have to tell you the part I have been putting off. For 12 years, I had been paying for most of my daughter's life without her knowing. It started in 2014. Brad was working at a construction supply company in a sales role and had just been demoted after a bad year. Megan was pregnant with Ava. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage and about to be foreclosed on. Megan called me crying at 11 at night. Daniel and I talked about it for an hour. We agreed we would help, but we agreed we would help in a way that did not turn into a lifestyle. We would pay the mortgage shortfall directly to the lender, not give them cash, so the money could not be redirected. We would do it for 2 years. Then we would reevaluate. 2 years became 12. Brad never recovered his earnings. Megan never went back to work after Ava was born. The mortgage shortfall grew when they refinanced into a bigger house in 2018. We paid it. Ava enrolled in a private school that Megan said was the only good option in the district. We paid the tuition. Brad's car lease came up and he wanted something nicer. Daniel said no. Megan cried. Daniel said yes. We paid the lease. The family's health insurance premium kept climbing on the marketplace exchange. We paid that too. Total, across 12 years. I worked it out Friday night, sitting on the floor of the office with a calculator and 12 folders of records. Just over $410,000. Megan and Brad did not know any of this. They thought Brad's income covered everything. They thought the mortgage was being paid by Brad's automatic deposit, which it was, except that Brad's automatic deposit was always $700 to $1,400 short of the actual payment, and the difference came out of an account in my name that I had been funding monthly for a decade. The tuition was paid by my check directly to the school. The lease was paid by my check directly to the dealer. The insurance came out of a separate account they thought was a tax credit. Daniel and I had set it up that way because we did not want Megan to feel like she was on an allowance. We wanted her to feel like she was succeeding. That was our mistake, and it was a big one. And I have thought about it every night for a week. Patricia laid out what Monday would look like if I signed the letter. The mortgage payment would default at the next billing cycle, which was the following Friday. The school's auto pay would bounce when it ran Monday afternoon. The auto lease would bounce when it ran Tuesday morning. The insurance would lapse at the end of the month. I asked Patricia for the pen. I signed every page. At 5:58 Sunday evening, I heard a car pull into the driveway. It was Megan. She was alone. No Brad, no Ava. Her face was streaked. She had been crying for a long time. She got out of the car. She walked to my front door. She rang the bell like a stranger. I opened the door. I let her in. I did not hug her. She did not try. She walked to the kitchen on her own and sat down at the table without being told. She had been sitting at that table since she was 4 years old. She knew the chair that was hers. She sat in it. I poured her a glass of water. I sat across from her. I did not say anything. She started talking before I had to ask. She said Brad had acted alone. She said she had not known about the login attempt Saturday night. She said she had been horrified when she found out, and she had told him she wanted a separation. She said she had been pressured into the Cedar Brook thing by Brad, who had been struggling with money, who had been desperate, who had convinced her over months that I was lonely in this house and would be better off somewhere supervised. She said she loved me. She said she had always loved me. She said she was sorry. I let her talk. I did not interrupt once. I have learned in 40 years of paralegal work that the longer you let someone explain themselves, the more useful information you get. The first version of a story is the rehearsed version. The second version is the partial truth. The third version, the version you get when the rehearsed version stops working, is usually the closest to what actually happened. Megan talked for almost 12 minutes. By the end of it, she was crying again. She had run out of material. When she stopped, I reached down beside my chair and lifted the folder Patricia had prepared for me Sunday morning. I set it on the table between us. I opened it slowly. I turned it so she could read it right side up. The first page was the bank record showing 18 months of unauthorized withdrawals from the savings account. Total at the bottom in red, $46,820. The second page was the home equity application from 6 weeks ago. Her signature was on the responsible party line. The third page was the forwarding orders from the post office, both of them, both with her zip code listed as the destination. The fourth page was the log of her 3 phone calls to the credit union in the past month, with the times, durations, and her stated purpose: power of attorney, account consolidation. The fifth page was Saturday night's login attempt, IP trace to her home address, time stamped at 11:16 p.m. The sixth page was an email from Brad to himself, sent Saturday afternoon, with the photographs of my fake file attached. The subject line read, "Got it." She read each page. She did not look up between them. When she got to Brad's email, she made a small noise in the back of her throat and put her hand over her mouth. Then I turned to the second half of the folder. I told her she had not yet seen the part that mattered. I turned the page. The next document was a list: 12 years of payments, mortgage shortfall by month, tuition by semester, auto lease by quarter, health insurance by year. Each line itemized, each total summed at the bottom of the page. The grand total was on the final page in the same red ink: $410,682. Megan stared at the number. She did not understand it at first. She read it 3 times. She looked up at me. She asked what it was. I told her. I told her how the mortgage payment had been short every month since 2014, and how Daniel and I had been covering the difference. I told her where the tuition checks had come from. I told her whose account had been paying for Brad's car. I told her that the health insurance she thought was being subsidized by a tax credit had been subsidized by me. She did not speak for a long time. She looked at the list. She looked at me. She looked at the list again. Then she put her head down on the table and she cried in a way she had not cried since she was a girl. It was not a performance. I have seen her perform. This was different. When she lifted her head, her makeup was gone, and her face was 20 years younger and 20 years older at the same time. I told her what was going to happen Monday. Every payment I had been making stopped at midnight. The demand letter terminating the support had already been sent by certified mail and would be delivered to her front door by 10 a.m. The mortgage shortfall would default at the next billing cycle. The school's auto pay would bounce Monday afternoon. The lease would bounce Tuesday. The insurance would lapse at the end of the month. I told her she had been removed as emergency contact, cosigner, and authorized user on every account I held. I told her the new estate plan was signed and filed. I told her the corporate trustee would administer everything from this point forward. I told her she was a contingent beneficiary only, and only under conditions she would not be told about in advance, and that if she contested any of it, she would be disinherited entirely. I told her there was a fund for Ava that she would never be able to touch. I told her one more thing. I told her she had said through her daughter that she would be happier when I was not around. I told her that starting tomorrow, she got to find out whether that was true. Without the mortgage, without the tuition, without the lease, without the insurance, without me, she begged. She offered to pay it all back. She said Ava would lose her school. She said they would lose the house. I told her Ava was the only person in that house I was still protecting. I walked her to the door at 7:43. On the porch, she turned around. Her face had hardened again. She said I would regret this. She said Brad had copies of everything from Saturday and he would use them. I told her I knew. I closed the door. Monday morning arrived the way Mondays do. I woke up at 5:45. I walked my 2 miles. The sun came up over the elementary school the way it has for 20 years. I came home and made coffee. At 9:04, Patricia called to confirm that the emergency motion had been filed and accepted. The protective order was in place pending a full hearing. Any pending financial action initiated in my name by Megan or Brad was now frozen by court order. At 9:47, the certified letter was delivered to Megan's front door. I got the signature confirmation on my phone. She signed for it herself. At 10:15, the mortgage company's automated system attempted to draw the supplemental payment from the account I had been funding. The account had been zeroed out Friday afternoon and closed. The draw failed. At 11:02, my phone rang. It was the bursar at Ava's school. They had a question about the setup, which had been flagged for a billing review. I told the woman that the payments had been my contribution as a grandparent, and that the contribution had ended effective immediately. I told her she should call Megan and Brad directly for any future arrangements. She thanked me and hung up. She did not sound surprised. At 1:30, the auto lease company emailed about a returned payment. At 2:40, Megan called me. I did not answer. She called again at 2:43. I did not answer. She called 5 more times between 3 and 4. I did not answer. She left no voicemails. At 4:06, Brad's car pulled into my driveway. I had been expecting him since the night before. Wesley and Patricia were already at my house. The court appointed investigator Patricia had called Sunday afternoon had also arrived. A woman in her 50s named Maureen Holcomb, who worked adult protective services intake for the county. The three of them had been sitting in my living room since 2:30, drinking coffee, talking quietly about other cases. They did not need to be there. They wanted to be there. Brad rang the bell. He was holding a manila envelope. He was wearing the same shirt he had worn Saturday. His face was pale and there was a sheen of sweat at his hairline. I opened the door. I let him in. I did not greet him. He started talking before he had taken 3 steps into the foyer. He said he needed to speak with me privately. He said this could be resolved if we were reasonable. He said he had something in his hand that he was prepared to use, but that he would rather not use if I would agree to certain things. I told him to come into the living room. He did not see Wesley, Patricia, or Maureen until he had turned the corner. When he did, he stopped. The envelope in his hand began to shake. I told him to sit down on the couch. He sat. Maureen introduced herself first. She showed him her county identification. She told him she was here in an official capacity, that this meeting was being treated as a documented interview under the state's Adult Protective Services statute, and that anything he said could be entered into the case file. She told him he was welcome to leave at any time, but if he chose to stay, he was choosing to participate. He chose to stay. He thought he still had leverage. Patricia spoke next. She asked him what was in the envelope. He hesitated. Then he opened it and laid the contents on the coffee table. Printouts of the photographs he had taken Saturday, the fake bank statements, the fake brokerage summary, the cover sheet of the fake will. He had printed them in color on glossy paper. He had highlighted 3 lines on the will page. He told us, in a voice that was trying very hard to sound calm, that he had documentation that I was hiding a will from Megan. He said he had documentation that I had inflated my account balances to appear more financially competent than I was. He said he was prepared to share these documents with other members of my family, including Daniel's surviving brother and my 2 sisters, and to suggest that I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. He said this could all go away if I reinstated the payments and rescinded the demand letter. He looked at me when he finished. He thought he had played his strongest card. Patricia let the silence sit for about 8 seconds. Then she opened her own folder. She told Brad that the documents he was holding had been planted Thursday night. She told him the file he had photographed was a decoy. She told him the real estate records were filed elsewhere with a corporate trustee and were not accessible to anyone except me and the trustee. She told him the photographs he had taken were now evidence of unauthorized entry into a private home office during a social visit, which was documented by my testimony, and that the email he had sent the photographs to himself, time-stamped Saturday at 1:52 p.m., was evidence of intent. She told him the login attempt Saturday night from his home IP address was already being processed by the brokerage's fraud team and the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, where a report had been filed Sunday morning at 9:10. She told him that attempt was a federal offense under the computer fraud statute with a potential sentence of up to 5 years. She told him the home equity inquiry from 6 weeks ago, with his wife's signature on the responsible party line, had been reported to the State Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection that same morning. She told him the file in front of him on the coffee table was at this point the least of his problems. Brad's face had gone from pale to white to gray. He looked at me. He looked at the envelope. He stood up. He sat back down. He did not know what to do with his hands. He left the envelope on the coffee table when he walked out at 4:48. At 11:19 that night, my phone rang. The display said unknown number. I answered. It was Ava. She was whispering. She said, "Grandma, are you okay? Mommy and Daddy are yelling. Daddy said we have to move." I told Ava to listen to me carefully. I told her I was okay. I told her she was not in trouble. I asked her whose phone she was using. She said it was the old phone her friend Bia had given her, the one Bia did not use anymore, that Ava kept hidden in her sock drawer for emergencies. I asked her if her mother or father knew she had it. She said no. I told her that was a smart thing for her to have. I told her to keep it hidden. I asked her if she could meet me before school the next morning. She said yes. I told her there was a small park 2 blocks from her school, the one with the green bench by the entrance. I told her I would be there at 7:40. I told her she should walk to school the way she always did, but stop at the park first, and we would talk for 20 minutes, and then she would go on to school, like nothing was different. She said, "Okay." She said she had to hang up. I told her I loved her. She said that she loved me too. The line went dead. I sat in the den for a long time after that. I did not move until Wesley came back at midnight with a sandwich for me because he had guessed I had not eaten. Tuesday morning, I drove to the park. I parked across the street. I sat on the green bench at 7:36. The air was cold. The grass had frost on it. Ava came around the corner at 7:41 with her backpack over one shoulder. She saw me and started to run, then remembered to walk. She sat down next to me on the bench. She did not hug me yet. She was watching my face to see what kind of conversation this was going to be. I want to tell you what I said to her because it is the part of this story I have thought about the most. I told her, in language an 11-year-old could understand, that her mother and father had made some choices recently that hurt me. I told her I had to do some things to protect myself and my home. I told her that some of those things would change how her family lived. I told her that her parents might be angry and that they might say things about me that were not kind, and that she was going to hear those things, and she should not believe all of them. I told her none of this was her fault. I told her that the words she had said to me at the kitchen table were not her words. They were words she had been asked to say. I told her I did not blame her for saying them. I told her a grown up should never ask a child to deliver a message to another grown up, that the grown up was too cowardly to deliver herself. She started to cry. I gave her a tissue from my pocket. I let her cry. When she was done, I told her three things she could count on for the rest of her life. I told her I would never disappear. I told her no matter what her parents said, I lived in the house on Linden Street and she could find me there. And the phone there would always answer when she called. I told her if anything ever happened where she could not reach me at home, she should call Wesley, whose number I had written on a small card I gave her. I told her to put the card in the lining of her backpack, where her parents would never look. The second thing I told her that there was money, a fund, I called it, a grandmother fund. I told her she would not be able to see it or use it until she was older, but that it was there, and it would be there when she was ready for college and for her first apartment and for whatever she wanted to do with her life. I told her the money was in a place her mother and father could not reach. I told her this was not a punishment for them. This was a promise to her. The third thing I told her she could come to Sunday dinner. Not this Sunday, but eventually. I told her it would have to be arranged through a person called a family mediator, who would be a neutral adult, who would make sure the visit was safe and that her parents agreed to it. I told her this was for her protection, not because I did not want her there. I told her Sunday dinner had been happening in my house since before her mother was born, and it would keep happening, and her seat would always be set. I asked her if she had any questions. She had one. She asked if her parents were going to jail. I told her honestly that I did not know. I told her that grown ups had to be responsible for their own choices and that there might be consequences, but that none of those consequences were her job to worry about. Her job was to be 11. I gave her a sealed envelope. I told her to put it somewhere safe, at home, somewhere her parents would not find it. I told her not to open it until her 18th birthday. I told her that on that day she could open it and read it and decide for herself what she wanted to do with what was inside. She held the envelope carefully. She put it in the inside pocket of her backpack. I walked her to the edge of the park. I watched her cross the street. She turned around twice to wave. I waved back both times. 3 weeks later, after Megan and Brad had refused supervised visits, then agreed, then refused again, then finally agreed, for real, a certified letter arrived at my house. It was from a law firm in the next county. Megan and Brad were filing for emergency conservatorship over me. They were claiming diminished capacity. I read the letter twice. I put it in a folder. I called Patricia. She laughed. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after the kitchen table. Patricia had been doing elder law for 30 years. She told me, the day the petition arrived, that she had seen exactly this play before, that families ran it when they were desperate, and that desperate families always made one critical mistake. They overestimated how much the court would take their word for, and they underestimated how easy it was for an organized, competent senior to walk into a courtroom and disassemble the entire case in under an hour. I asked her what I needed to do. She said, "Be yourself, in detail, with witnesses." So, that is what I did. The morning of the hearing, I walked my 2 miles. I put on the navy suit I had worn to court 100 times in my paralegal career. I drove myself downtown. I parked in the structure I had parked in for 20 years. Megan and Brad arrived with an attorney I did not recognize. Patricia checked the directory while we waited in the hallway and told me The man had been admitted to the bar 4 years ago and worked out of a strip mall office that mostly handled traffic tickets. They had not been able to afford anyone better. The demand letter had done its work. Brad had taken a job in the previous month. Megan had not. They had sold one car already. Patricia walked in with a banker's box of evidence and 3 witnesses. The first witness was my cardiologist, Dr. Adesina, who had performed my annual cognitive screen 6 weeks earlier as part of my routine physical. He had brought the original assessment with him. He testified that I scored above the average for my age group in every cognitive domain measured, and that there was no clinical indication of diminished capacity of any kind. The second witness was my primary care doctor, Dr. Whitfield, who had been my physician for 14 years. She testified that she had seen me twice in the last year, that I was in good health, that I managed my own medications without assistance, and that the petition's claims of confusion and forgetfulness had no basis in any clinical record she was aware of. The third witness was Eleanor Reeves, the managing partner of the firm I had done overflow paralegal work for since 2019. She testified that I had completed 47 billable hours of estate work for her in the past quarter alone, and that she had no concerns about the quality of my work or my mental acuity. Then Patricia called her fourth witness. He had not been on the original list. Daniel Reyes from Cedar Brook walked into the courtroom in the same suit he had worn to my kitchen. He had been subpoenaed 2 weeks earlier. He looked uncomfortable, but he was under oath. Patricia asked him to describe his interactions with Megan prior to the Saturday visit. He testified that Megan had toured the facility twice. He testified that she had paid a deposit. He testified that on her second visit, she had asked him, specifically, how quickly a durable power of attorney could be transferred to a child once a parent was admitted to independent living. He testified that he had told her this was a legal question and that she would need to consult an attorney. He testified that she had asked him 3 times anyway. The strip mall attorney did not have a cross examination. The judge had been listening with the slightly tilted head judges use when they have already made up their minds and are waiting for protocol to catch up. He looked at Megan and Brad. He asked the strip mall attorney if he had any evidence to present. The strip mall attorney said he had photographs and a statement from Brad describing concerns about my decision making. The judge asked when the photographs had been taken. The strip mall attorney did not know. Patricia did. She told the court. She told the court what they were photographs of. She told the court whose home office they had been taken in without permission during a social visit. The judge denied the petition at 11:17 a.m. The whole hearing had taken 19 minutes. Outside the courthouse, on the steps, Megan tried one more time. She came down the steps after me. She caught up to me near the curb. She said, "Mom, please. We're family." I stopped. I turned around. I looked at her. I said, "You told my granddaughter we would all be happier when I was not around. I made it true. For me, the rest of you can figure out happiness on your own." I got in my car and I drove home. That was 4 months ago. I am still in the house on Linden Street. I still walk my 2 miles before sunrise. I still host Sunday dinner. The table is smaller now. Wesley comes every week. 2 of my widowed friends, Marion and Janet, come most weeks. Patricia came once, and now comes about every other month. Ava has come 3 times so far, supervised by the family mediator, a calm woman named Rosa, who sits in the den with her book while Ava and I cook. Together in the kitchen, Ava is 11. She still likes lemon shortbread. Megan and Brad sold their house in February. They moved into a rental in a town 2 hours away. Brad took a second job at a warehouse on the overnight shift. Megan has not asked me for money once. I do not think she will. She knows the answer. I started a small group at the community center on Wednesday mornings. 6 women so far, all widows, all being pressured by their families to sign things they should not sign. I do not give legal advice. I just tell them what happened to me, and I give them Patricia's card. People ask me sometimes if I miss having my daughter in my life. I tell them the truth. I miss the daughter I thought I had. The one in front of me at the kitchen table was someone else. My granddaughter said we would be happier when I was not around. She was repeating her mother's words. Her mother was wrong about which one of us was about to disappear. I am still here. They just do not get to feel it anymore.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.